The IPA has been Australia's strongest voice for freedom for 70 years. It was formed in 1943 to fill a void. The Liberal side of Australian politics was in disarray. The Curtin Labor government wanted to exploit the wartime circumstances to massively increase the role of the Commonwealth government, taking powers from both the states and the citizens. At this critical moment in Australian history, a group of business leaders, including George Coles, Sir Keith Murdoch, Sir Walter Massey Green and Ian Potter, formed the Institute of Public Affairs to counter the threat of extensive and permanent government control and the loss of personal freedom and the destruction of industrial democracy. The IPA's landmark report, Looking Forward, written in 1944 by the first executive director, David Kemp, demonstrated that a non-socialist post-war future was possible. Looking Forward established a credible basis for modern Australian liberalism. When he was founding the Liberal Party, Robert Menzies wrote that Looking Forward was the finest statement of basic political and economic problems made in Australia for many years. He read from it at the founding conference of the Liberal Party. In 1947, the IPA first published the IPA Review, which is now Australia's longest-running political magazine. Throughout its history, the IPA has been one of the strongest voices against big government. It was a key opponent of the Chifley government's attempt to nationalise Australian banks after the Second World War. Today it has led the campaign against the federal government's attacks on freedom of speech. When other organisations were accepting that new restrictions on liberty were inevitable, the IPA was making the arguments for why they needed to be opposed. The IPA was at the forefront of the revival of free market ideas during the 1970s and 1980s. In 1976, the IPA helped to host the visit to Australia of one of the 20th century's greatest voices for free markets and individual liberty, the Nobel Prize-winning economist Friedrich Hayek. The IPA forcefully articulated the danger that inflationary government posed to the Australian living standards. By the early 1980s, it had become one of the first advocates of major industrial relations reform and privatisation. And in 1992, the IPA was the first in Australia to identify the threat to the economy posed by a carbon tax. The IPA hasn't only been interested in economics, of course. In the 1980s, the IPA was the first line of defence in the culture wars. It exposed the failures of leftist education policies. In 1988, it revealed how the proposed celebration of the bicentenary completely distorted Australian history. Today, the IPA has been at the forefront of opposition to the distortions of our history in the national curriculum and has fought the worst excesses of nanny state restrictions. The IPA receives no government funding. It depends entirely on the support of its members, but with that support, it has managed to be the loudest voice for free markets and liberty since 1943.